Thank you all so much for joining me for Ascend the Matrix podcast. I'm your host, Chrys King. I'm a shamanic healer, ascended astrologer, and business mentor to psychics, light workers, and starseeds and new earth leaders. And I have an incredible guest on today. Her name is Ashley Brothers, and she has been a motivational speaker, international life coach, and a specialist in psychic readings and multidimensional healing since 2004. She has studied with shamans, mystics, healers, doctors, scientists, and spiritual leaders from various cultures throughout the world to learn the most powerful and effective techniques that help people heal and transform their lives and to manifest their greatest destinies. I love that. Her techniques are a blend of neuroscience and spirituality, which is so why I felt called to this person because I am left and right brain completely 50-50. So I'm so glad to welcome you in here. And, this has effectively helped hundreds of people in 33 countries worldwide through her remote and in-person sessions and workshops. They include channeled readings, Reiki, soul retrieval, extraction of intrusive energies, curse unraveling, holographic matrix re-imprinting, which I definitely want to talk about that because my assistant was like, what is holographic matrix re-imprinting? And I knew, I even felt what it was, but I've heard about it before, and I want to go into that. Intuitive life coaching, HeartMath, and much more. Thank you so much for being here, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want the audience to get to know you a little bit, like how you got to this point, because you're like myself. We are on a mission, and it's a when I say singular mission, I mean just focused and really in our power around it, and just we just don't have a choice. This is what we're here to do. But also, there are many departments of our soul mission that have come in to coalesce. Like in my process, I really embody the Chiron archetype, and he was an astrologer, a medium, a healer, a teacher. And so when people say, wow, you do all kinds of things, and I'm like, actually, I just live under the Chiron umbrella. So it all actually coalesces together. And I also noticed the number 33 here in your bio, and I know that wasn't necessarily on purpose to what we're going to talk about, but that is also a number in the Freemasonry and certain ritual cults. And so I'm not that that's directly related, but it stuck out to me. So I know that Spirit is wanting to talk about that during this time. So obviously, your work is multidimensional. It is shamanic, whether you call yourself that or not. It is psychic. You are a new earth leader from my perspective. But how did you get here? Take us back to your childhood, to your young adult life. I want to hear about any awakenings that you had because people listening are going to think, how did these people get to where they are? Especially light workers listening who are going through Kundalini awakening or ascension symptoms, and they feel like my life is going to hell. Let's give them our perspective so that they can know there's light on the other end of that tunnel.
So I'm going to start off like in college and then backtrack
Yeah,
for
let's
just a
do it.
second. So when I was in college, I was talking to my parents on the phone. I was a freshman. And I was like, do you remember that time when mom had passed out between this black chair and an ottoman because she had been a juvenile onset diabetes individual? And I was like, this is what she wore that day, is how she put her hair in rollers. I listed off all the TV shows that she had watched and everything she had done that day, and how my sister and I had played with Lincoln logs and blocks next to her body until dad got home. And I literally described the living room, everything in detail. My mom freaks out, hands the phone to my dad, and he's like, what the heck's going on? So I recite the entire story again. And he's like, well, a lot of your information is correct. He's like, but your sister had not been fed or changed in 7 hours until I got home. I said, what about me? He's like, your mother was 6 months pregnant with you
Yeah,
at the
I
time, and
had
she
a
had
feeling.
fallen directly on you.
Wow.
And so, but I remembered it as if I was floor level,
Because you
you
were.
know?
You
And it
were.
didn't occur to me that my sister was still in diapers, even though she was 2.5 years older than me. So,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Wow.
So it was just like, so that's the first part. And then I remember getting weighed as a baby. I remember my first shots from the doctor.
Yeah.
I remember hanging on the edge of my crib watching what I called the gray people walking around the room.
I had the same experience in my crib. Like, knowing that I should be able to talk because I've been able to talk before, right? Why can't I do that now? So it's interesting how many light workers and star seeds and people who come in with lots of different lives that they've lived here and they're on a mission, they're like, we have to do this baby thing again. There's this memory and this knowing because we don't totally forget and we're not totally wiped like other people.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, for me, I called them gray people. They were shadow beings. And my
Yes.
poor parents could hear me screaming through the floor
Yeah.
for years because I was not born with angels. I was born with horrible demonic things that were torturing me. And sometimes I'd fall out of bed or out of the crib and my head be cracked and bleeding.
Yeah.
Like I didn't come into this in a pleasant way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until many years later that I realized my grandfather was a head mason for the whole Midwest for I don't know how long, 33rd degree, Knight Templar,
Wow.
the whole ball of wax. And apparently he was in charge of doing all the rituals and stuff that would bring people in.
Yep.
And I didn't know until probably about 6 months ago they offer up their bloodline.
Yep. Yes.
And
So,
so people kept saying I was cursed all my life, and I had no idea what that meant because I couldn't have been nicer if I tried.
right.
But now I understand that I was born under a shadow because of somebody else's rituals and ceremonies.
Yeah.
And so I was turned on. I had premonitions that would prevent accidents and death even when I was a child. And
Yeah.
sometimes I would have to get into the car knowing something bad was about to happen to me and my mother. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
started off having these things where I'd have to save her life, or I would be feeling and sensing other people's emotions or their thoughts
Yeah.
and being able to interpret them, not just from the empath who's just absorbing everybody's crud, but I mean like literally interpreting it correctly. So
Right.
clairsentience.
Yes.
And then having to go, what do I do with this? And I wasn't able to call upon it at will until I started my training in 2004.
Hmm.
So for the first, oh gosh, 26 years of my life was torturous hell with this type of thing. So it wasn't
Yeah.
like a pleasant thing. I wanted to know more because I was curious. And so I would do tarot cards and read books about the occult and witchcraft, things like that, because as one does, that's like often where people
Yeah.
start with
Yeah.
what's available in the bookstore.
Yeah. And
And so
also,
that's
it
sort
may
of,
have just
yeah.
resonated with us. I also have a great grandfather who I'm named after, who was a Freemason. I would go down to my grandmother's, he was also a Shriner. I would go down in her basement and get his big maroon hat thing and put
Yes.
it on, and
Yep.
it would slide down to my nose, and I would tell her that I used to wear this. I used to wear this. And she'd be like, what do you mean by that? Until a medium told me when I was 20 that he and I have this connection. And so I definitely know that I'm here to undo that, or, but it showed up in my experience in childhood and adult life as really dark things. I was like, where are my angels and where are the love and light fairies at? Why am I being called to do such healing work? And why am I so in love with people and so full of life and joy and have this vibrant personality, even as a small child? But these dark things that live within me, which is such a shamanic code, but it's also a code of someone who's come here specifically to unravel some of the darkest, densest frequencies that we're currently unraveling now in the collective. So I see you, and I am so blessed that you took the initiation and stepped in. And I want to go back to 2004 and what that training was like for you and what initiated you into saying, I'm going to harness this.
So I was actually working for the government at the time. I was a supervisor for medical claims examiners for Social Security disability. So I was reading people's records, determining if they were capable of work, and if not, would you get money type of thing.
Yeah.
So I was just like, God, there's got to be more to life than this. At that point, I had been like divorced for a couple years and dealing with depression and anxiety. So I was young. I was married and divorced young, dealing with
Yeah.
depression and anxiety and on medications for about 2 years. And I was like, there's got to be more to life than this. And so I just wandered into a tarot card shop and had my cards read. And the reading itself was unremarkable until I bent down to pick up my purse. And the lady's like, do you know that you can speak to the dead? And all the hair on my body stood on end because
Mm.
one of the reasons why I was on medications is like after my mom died, and this was like 10 days after I had left my ex-husband back in 1999. After my mom died, I was really depressed, things like that. But the doctor asked, "Do you hear voices?" And I was like, "Oh God, somebody's finally interested in my spirituality." Nope.
Nope.
Nope. That was
I
not
know.
it. So there Ashley gets doped up with some antipsychotics and stuff for a couple years until I was, healed. But anyway, so I go have this tarot card reading, and the lady's like, if you want to develop that gift, why didn't you call this woman? And the card was for a woman who would become my first shamanic teacher and healer.
Mm,
And I went for a healing first. And afterwards, I became such a totally different person. I dropped 100 pounds, 110
yeah.
pounds. I was able to hug my family for the first time in years,
Yeah.
despite severe trauma in the past.
Yeah.
And I started public speaking. I just became somebody else because of soul retrieval. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
I want to do this for other people.
Yeah.
So I started with this person who was half Apache, half Irish.
Hmm.
And I
Beautiful.
started off with like sweat lodges and learning how to develop my psychic skills. And then I was introduced to a Lakota gentleman that taught me their songs, ceremonies, and dances, including like not only sweat lodges, but Humblecha, which is Vision Quest, and
Yes.
then the
Yes.
Sundance,
Beautiful.
and even pipe carving and how to
Yeah.
walk with that energy. So I did that for 12 years and got into other things, but it was about a year into my training that something happened to me medically that was just like the gates just blew wide open because
Yeah.
I had more than one foot in the grave at that point because of the medical situation. And so oftentimes we have these initiations when we're young because of trauma or
Yeah.
just because that's how we're born. But then going through a medical thing was like putting your feet to the fire
Yeah.
because if you don't listen, you'll die.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah. So
yeah.
it feels like that you were never ever contracted to become a victim to the bloodline curse, which that sounds so insane to some people, but not necessarily people listening on this podcast, but just those things that sounds like that's out of a movie. And it's like, well, but there's a reason they're making movies about these things, you know? They're not as original as you think they are. They're getting it from somewhere. And some of us, not or all of us, light workers, star seeds, whatever you want to call it, people who are incarnating on purpose from other times on this planet, from other star systems, from other realms, are specifically choosing the densest and most, the bloodlines that have the largest momentum, the trauma that has just gone on for so many generations that they're just going to make you stop it in some way, you know, or you have decided I'm going to stop or jump in front of this train. And when you jump in front of the train, you usually get clobbered for a minute, you know, or several times and have to put yourself back together again. And soul retrieval, shamanic soul retrieval is one of the best ways to put yourself back together on an energetic level, because it's a missing link in much of the healing work we're doing is that there are these soul fractures that need
Yeah.
to be called back in. And so while other people are having walk-ins come into them, you're just embodying more of who you really are and bringing the light that has been scattered back into this. So okay, I'm going to let you take over from here.
I would say I had to walk in
Oh, okay.
unintentionally. But
Please go into that. I would love to know more.
uh so okay, so I started my training in 2004, and in 2005 I had a surgery where a doctor was supposed to remove some ovarian cysts and unbeknownst to me left something behind. And so I started my training, and I just felt like something was inside my body, and the guy that I was working with at the time said, go look throughout your house and look for whatever you left yourself subconsciously. And on my altar was the figurine of a pregnant woman next to a wooden skull. So I had something growing inside of me because of this thing that was left.
Yeah.
So I called the doctor's office. It took them a couple months to get me in. And by the time I actually went in there, they said I was just fat, constipated, and that I needed to go home. And I refused to leave without an ultrasound, which after that I was rushed in to get an MRI. They still wouldn't tell me what was going on, but I had a feeling they were going to lie to me and remove what they'd left without telling me.
Right, so
So I
that they
went,
weren't liable.
right. So I went to
Screw
somebody
them.
else,
God.
right? So I went to somebody else. And so about it was 7.5, almost 8 months later after the original surgery. And they found two grapefruit sized masses
Hmm.
that had fused all my organs together. They were basically abscesses, and one had a forgotten sponge in it.
Whoa.
So they had to remove the abscesses and my left ovary, surgically separate all my organs. And then 8 months after that, I had to have a total hysterectomy because all my organs fused together again because the suture material from the first two surgeries never dissolved. And then fast forward 8 months later after that, I collapsed in the shower with chest pain and shortness of
I'm
breath.
feeling the chest pain right now. That's so strange. I was just about to say, why is my chest hurting?
Well, I went in for some tests and they told me it was all in my head, that there was nothing wrong. It was all fabricated. They said I was like they said a lot of women have symptoms with no basis in reality, and I was a typical woman that needed to
Oh
learn to
my God, they still
relax.
say things like that. I mean,
Oh
that's so
yeah.
1960s.
Yep. They said that just because I thought I had chest pain and shortness of breath, it was just my mind telling me I was unhappy and there was nothing wrong with me. I need a psychiatrist. And then another guy said,
God.
"You're not dead yet, so it can't be that bad."
Oh my
I
God.
actually, I actually had to order my records to find out that I had developed a rare disease that was eating through my arteries and my aorta because of systemic inflammation. I had four hernias, a collapsing intestine, a twisted bowel, ulcerative colitis, and a whole bunch of other things. And because I was in the midst of a medical lawsuit, I was refused care by 40 doctors in three different states. 40. I stopped counting after that. And so I really had to step into this other realm and go, what's going on with my body? Show me where, show me what tests I have to order to prove it. And what do I need to do to turn it off? And so I had lost 90% of the blood to my left arm and most of it to my legs. I ended up having seizures every single day. I had 16 strokes, one of which wiped out my memory for 2.5 years. I couldn't read, I couldn't do math, and I had no idea who I was. And it was then that I had the walk in
Oh my gosh.
because
Where are we at now? Like 2006, 2007, where are we at now?
2010 I had the open heart. Oh, so
I'm like,
so I,
is
I so
2012 going
okay,
to come up at some point? I'm like,
okay, yeah. So I so my guides say, okay, I was like, this is deliberate, isn't it? And they said, yes, you need to fly to California. And I said, I don't know anybody in California. They said, don't worry, you know somebody who does. And they flashed the picture of a doctor I had worked with 6 years before. And so I emailed him and I said, do you remember me? He said, yes. I said, I explained my situation. I said, where do I go? He said, go to Stanford. So I fly to Stanford. And while I'm looking out the window, I ask, will these people be able to help me? And these tiny little lakes light up in the distance. And they said they won't be able to help you, but they will know somebody who can. And I said, tell me more. And this gigantic lake lit up in the distance like a copper penny as the sun came over the horizon. They said you will have to travel east, but don't worry, they will tell you exactly where to go. So I get down to California and they say your situation is so complex because of all the different situations you have. I suggest you fly east to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And so I fly there. They tell me that I had this rare disease that most people die within 5 years. It's considered incurable, and most people are in chemotherapy and prednisone until they die.
wow,
And I decided to reject that.
good.
However, I still had to deal with it because
Yeah.
of the way that my arteries were scarred and my aorta was scarred. I had to have synthetic tubes put in my chest to give me the blood to both my legs, my left arm, and my brain. So so 11 days later,
I'm
I'm
feeling it
home.
right now in my body. That's why I'm just like, how the hell did you not several times? I mean, shamanic practitioners, light workers, star seeds. I use these terms because I want people to know we're all in this together. The ones who've contracted to do some really big, heavy lifting on the ascension path and in this awakening. That's why we incarnated during this time. the path can be so dark and so hopeless feeling. I mean,
Oh yeah.
how did you not several times say something must have been, a fire must have never went out in you that said you're going to get through this, even when your human was like, I'm going to die, but I'm still going to get on the plane and try. But how did you not totally let the doctors convince you? Like, what they're, this is why I want people to hear that your spirit, not just your spirit guides, because who knows who they are, right? But your spirit, your light, your higher self, your future self who's beckoning you toward it, who came in on this mission, knows what to do and has your back. I mean, because for someone who has been to the deepest, darkest depths of what it's like to be human, as we have, and you're sharing more of your side of that here, and I am blown away, just as you'd probably be blown away at some of the things I've been through, where we're like, how did we do this? Why did we decide to come here? You know, we were light fairies in the plasma realms and we decided to come here and do this, but something kept calling forth more power, more hope for you. And I just want you to go into that.
Well, here's the thing. Back when I was 17, I made a vow that would end up playing out for the next 20 some years of my life. So I wanted people to be extremely careful what they say in times of desperation. I said that my mother's legacy of abuse would die with me, that I would never have love or a family, and that my greatest gift to humankind would be to never procreate because I did not want to share my bloodline.
Right.
Fast forward 5 years, my mother dies in her sleep, and I end up losing my entire reproductive system, so I cannot bear children. And
Wow.
then the love thing just never played out because of what I set in motion.
Yeah.
And so I believe that aside from my mother cursing me and telling me she wished I was dead until the day she died, then I took up that own torch for myself, wishing my life away. And it didn't come in my sleep like my mother. It came
Right.
slowly and took pieces of my body.
Do you feel that that vow you made was you, though? Or was it the programming and the curse and the sort of mind
It was
control?
me. It was me.
Hmm.
I will own that it was part of the other, but it was also free will.
Yes, that
I
you
I
bought into it.
I I put enough emotional intensity and repetition into it that it
Yeah.
became a thing. And so fast forward, so I'm in the situation, and I nobody's telling me what's going on until I order my records. And at that point, I had just started to get to know my guides. Probably about 5 years truly into me being sick was a really good connection with a guide. And in one of my near death experiences, I popped out of my body and I'm sort of hovering over the earth. And I see this tray of test tubes. They're clanking together. And I didn't realize what was actually happening at the time, but they're clanking together. And I just looked out in the universe and I said, are there any star beings here that will tell me what's happening? And one showed up. Uh, I'll explain more about that later. One showed up and he's just like, what do you want? And I said, oh, sorry. And I was like, what are these test tubes? And he says, those are the years of your life. I said, why are they clanking? He's like, you're having a grand mal seizure. He's the first person to let me know. And I said, what is the dark blue test tube? He's like, that is the year of your death. So I counted, it was that year. And he's like, you are dying. And he's like, if you haven't figured that out yet, go order your records at X, Y, and Z. So I thanked him, went on my merry way. And then later, another guide showed up for me and he's like, you really are dying. And so he would breathe in my chest for me so I could make it up the stairs.
Wow.
Because I would wake up every morning with no circulation in my arms or my legs or my face. And so to stay in my body was such a tremendous thing. And here's the thing, people talk about their near death experiences and going to heaven. I never went there.
Yeah.
I went to not hell, but
The
the
bit,
void.
yeah. The
And I
sort
was,
of in
when you
between
talk about,
realms.
yeah, I was in the void. It was all
Yep.
black. And
Yep.
so for me, I was like, I'm not going to go out like this. Because he said, what makes you stay here? I'm like, I'm not going out under these terms and having to be reborn again into hell because I didn't figure something out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going out and then having to go through life reincarnated, having to figure out these lessons over and over again. So I was clinging to my body. And so these guides would, they would breathe in my chest for me. They told me what to start or stop eating to turn off all the diseases and to kill things naturally,
Beautiful. Hmm.
and to get to this one particular doctor, and they were like, we don't even know how you're still here. I
Yeah.
mean, it was so pinched off in terms of the aorta and the artery in my left arm, and they're like, you could have died like that at any
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually had to prepay for my cremation, and my urn came in the mail with thank you cards for my funeral and a whole ball of wax because I was that close.
Gosh. Talk about a shamanic energy, just like being your own death doula.
Oh yeah, there was no chance of survival whatsoever without that surgery. Like, let that sink in.
Yeah.
Without that surgery, I would be dead.
Yeah.
And there would be something that would sit on the edge of my bed and lean over me at night, and he would get really close to my face and like whisper horrible things in my ear.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, I have my surgery December 29th, 2010. I come home on January, I think 6th or 7th or whatever, something like that. And I'm walking through the neighborhood with my walker as I'm trying to recover from this open heart surgery. And he comes up next to me. And I was like, what do you want? And he's like, you just fascinate me. I was like, ugh. I was like, what? He's like, you suffer so beautifully.
Ugh.
And he's just like, you never seem to give up, and not like typical simpering humans. And I was just like, go away. And I thought he did. And I think he went into me because I lost my memory for the next 2.5 years. And it took a while for somebody to say, why don't you go get a healing? Because I forgot all my gifts. I forgot what I did. I forgot who I was.
Wow.
And it was like my eye holes were like way up here, and I was in the back seat of a car.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't tolerate my perfumes. I cut off all my hair. My belongings felt like they belonged to somebody else. They were vaguely familiar, like you walked past a store window every day and saw
Right.
those things, but they
They
didn't feel
didn't
like
belong.
mine.
Yeah.
No. And so after I got the healings, probably about 6 months in, I felt a click, and I was like, am I back? Like, oh my God. And I went to work that day, and I laughed for the first time in like 2.5 years. And everybody in the office turned around and looked at me, including the doctor, and said, where have you been? We don't know who's been here, but it wasn't you.
It wasn't.
And so I believe like that I had a walk-in at that point. And I've met walk-ins. And so I can oddly, definitely say, yeah, there was a
Yeah.
male being there.
And I want to say to those listening that, I have people in my life who are walk-ins and they're beautiful people. And the
Mhm.
person that was once in that body that died in that motorcycle accident, I'm using one in particular, is not there anymore. And someone else stepped in who is just an embodiment of the divine masculine. I can tell
Yep.
you that. And then you've got other kinds of walk-ins. Okay. And then you have
Yes.
artificial. I'm going to have someone else. I've had him on my podcast before. You should check him out. His name is Alondra Markman. He was in the satanic ritual cults from the time he was born. He was born into a multi-generational satanic family. I'm actually interviewing him today. So he's going to be on again, but he has a consciousness transfer where he's got multiple entities, and I mean entities as in just consciousnesses, not negative entities in the astral realm or anything like that. But he has multiple kind of utilizing and working through one body. So the universe is weird, yes, but so is the false matrix. So are the things that happen here in the 3D realm with this 4D canopy that lives above us, and all of these different technologies that they're employing to do this, but also the way in which this false matrix works, how there are energies, thought forms, entities, if you want to call them that get trapped in this fourth dimensional duality state that can then interact with the beings in the third dimension, but can't reach the ones in the fifth dimension, and that was by design. And just the I can plainly see how you ended up doing all the different modalities and the work that you do. Like, it's plain and simple. You had to go through that to even desire to want to help other people with that. But how scary is that? Like, take us. So I'm guessing this is around 2013 when you kind of realize I'm back.
2012.
Okay, I had a feeling everyone I have on this podcast, including myself, have this huge moment that happens in 2012. And yes, the Mayan calendar and the beginning of 5D and all of that. But for some reason, 2012 is this just clicking in some way, this just awakening. And it was dark for me, very dark in 2012. But it was one of my very first true awakenings to who I really am. And it sort of set the tone for the rest of where we go from here. So, what do you feel happened? Why did he leave this entity? Why did this walk-in leave? What was the occurrence? And then take us from there.
So I went to one. So one of my teachers is Betsy Bergstrom. She does all the crazy, wild mediumship, uh, advanced depossession type work, also Norwegian type shamanism, things like that. And so she is the queen of all things mystical as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. But I went to her after I had tried to have somebody else who it felt like they just poked a hole through the anesthesia wall that I was under, because I don't feel like the anesthesia really wore off. In
Oh,
fact, I had to have a blood transfusion during that surgery, at the open heart surgery, and all these years later, I remembered waking up on the table with my chest open.
ooh,
Yeah, so I had a recent memory for the very first time of that, and so I feel like they had to dope me higher, because
yeah,
I kept losing consciousness even after I woke up, and they kept having to yell at me to get me to stay in my body. So
yeah,
whatever the case may be, but so I went to her about 2.5 years later after I had had somebody else work on me, and she's like, "Do you know of anything that's with you?" And I sensed, and I said, "He calls himself Death." She's like, "He's not the big D. He's just a being that's with you, that's masquerading as that energy." And so
yeah.
she removed him as well as energy for my deceased mother, who had been haunting us for a good 15 years, and removed her, and then did soul retrieval on me. And it took about a month or two to feel the full integration, and I actually felt a pop in my body, in
Yeah.
my chest, where the seat of your
That's
soul
all
actually
I can
is.
feel. This entire conversation is it is painful what's happening right here. It's not unbearable, but it is visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that there was so much that was going on with Betsy's work helped me pop back into my body.
Yeah.
um and so I'd started again my training in 2004 and was with all these various practitioners, and then 2012 got my stuff back, like my consciousness back, my gifts and skills that had been gone for 2.5 years. And then the guide that was temporarily there said, "You need to sign up for the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, their 2 week and their 3 year program." And so I went through the 2 week program, and I was like, I need to do more. And I was the day before, actually, no, there was a gap of time. There were 6 weeks in between the 2 week program and the 3 year program, the beginning of that, where I acted like a guide came through and said, "Today you're going to be asked to perform an active service." And I was led to a man I'd never met before, and I acted as his death doula for the last 6 weeks
Mm.
of his life.
Wow.
And I was actually going through a relapse of the medical condition that I had at that time. And so I was going through the dying process yet again, where I'd lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks, and I had to eat like a jar of almond butter a day to stay at 120 pounds
Wow.
at 5'8". So, I mean, I was just like in this zone of transition. He dies. About a week or so later, I have a grand mal seizure. I wake up in bed and he's there, the guy who had passed. And I said, "I'm not going today, Marcus." And about an hour later, I ended up having the biggest stroke of my life, and wiped out the ability to eat solid food for the next 3 years,
God.
because I had left-sided paralysis.
God.
And I had to drive 4 hours the next day to go to my first day of my 2 week training. So like there was it was a 3 year program, but I was going to be with them for 2 weeks once a year for 3 years. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I drove packed in ice, hoping I didn't have another stroke, and realizing I can't. eat anything. So I packed a blender and I'm off to
Wow.
this training where they really teach you how to go into the other realms in ways I can't even begin to describe.
Yeah.
It was like unlike any other training I'd had with any other practitioners. And so I just, so that was in 2013. And from there it just became this, again, this major thing where I was basically huffing ether all day. I was in and out of the spirit realms. I could channel for 8 hours at a time. I was just always on.
Yeah.
And the guide that was helping me through my death process, or my death and rebirth process, was with me and guiding me and talking to me as if we were in the same body. Like he was in my head all day long. And
Yeah.
sometimes he would take over and say different words from different languages that if you strung all the words together, they
Was it?
created a full
Yeah.
sentence. But they could be Lakota, they could be Russian, they could be Chinese, and all these different things. I didn't know any of these languages.
Yeah.
And so they would just string together and they would be something. And I was just like, oh my God. And sometimes he would take over, change my eye colors, and just do certain things to heal people or to protect me.
Mm.
And so just weird stuff just really started happening
Yeah.
when I was in deep in these ceremonies over and over, in these rites and these initiations. And then I decided to double down and also learn from Alberto Villoldo from the Four Winds Society and go down to Chile and Peru and California and learn those traditions. So I was
Yeah.
learning from people from Mongolia, um, from England, from New Zealand, from Africa, from Tibet, from all over through these different training programs, just to learn as much as I could from all these different cultures, to go, how do I help people heal? Because I don't want anybody to go through what I went through
Totally.
and have to rely on a medical community that fails.
That's right.
Because we do not, we are a disease management society. We are not an actual healthcare
That's right.
thing. And a lot of people, they are suffering from depression and anxiety because of soul loss, because they've wished their life away or they went through some sort of trauma, and we call it dissociation. But that dissociation truly is soul loss, and
Right.
that leaves an opening for other beings to come in, like a squatter taking over a house.
Yeah.
And it may not be a full walk-in, but man, that person might start taking on personality traits, addictions, um, start speaking meanly to people or hating things that they used to love. Total
Mm.
personality change because of that. But that's where I caution people, because in their quest to heal, a lot of people go down all these spiritual routes and reading all these books and experimenting, and they are welcoming in something that is what you we talked about earlier, is false light.
Yes.
They are actually, I've had people wish their lives away and ask something to be put back in, and they start having multiple voices, or they will feel a pop and see a white orb leave their chest and black orbs come in.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
have no idea what they're doing when just by speaking out loud. They think that nobody's listening.
Yeah.
Aha. There are so many things that are listening going, oh, she just made a contract, a
Totally.
legal binding deal that then, unless that person breaks it, good luck.
How do you break it?
You may have to go to some courts in the other realm. And there are different courts. There are mercy courts. There are courts of ownership and order. Like ownership might be if a freemasonry, you offered up your bloodline and you
Right.
don't realize that you as a descendant, some being thinks it owns you. Or
Yeah.
if you're like, oh, this person's my soulmate, my twin flame, my past life lover, and you do some sort of binding ceremony.
Yeah.
Or you're in a toxic relationship with somebody who's obsessive or narcissistic and they think they own you.
Yeah.
Or cults or churches
Yeah.
where you have to literally say words out loud of commitment and fellowship and all the different things. You might have all these titles and liens against you, and at first it's very empowering and it lets you go so far, like a leash that's
Right.
allowed out. And then when it wants to pull you back, suddenly everything in your life stops.
Yeah. I feel like our government, Hollywood, the Illuminati, even the Illuminati themselves, like the humans, not the reptilians or the shapeshifters, but like
Yeah.
just the humans who are being mind controlled. Like we have humans that are just actual humans doing things because they've made agreements. It's like we want to get on Jay-Z and Beyonce and get on Rihanna and really get on them for being a part of all that. And it's like, well, first of all, they're mind controlled, and second of all, there's an agreement that goes beyond just a physical piece of paper, and it allows you something. And especially if you're not spiritually evolved or your ego is really leading the show, the things that you receive for that contract totally fulfill you feel. Okay, the billions of dollars or the power or all, even certain talents, like certain abilities that your body can do. I mean, I know celebrities who their voice sounds so much better and so much more powerful now after the contract has been made, and I'm like, what vocal coach are you going to? Because that feels to me like um power. It feels like some type of, it's supernatural. That's the word I'm looking for. And so I feel like there's so many contracts happening, and what I'm feeling is that most of these contracts, when you say in other realms, you're talking about, especially in these like 4D other denser realms where these things are happening. It isn't just in other timelines here. There's this overcast of energy that doesn't exist in the upper realms, basically.
Well, you might have some soul contracts, like you might be born with certain rights or privileges or scrolls or inheritance that comes into your life. But guess what? You can put that on a back burner or not be, or denied rights and privileges that might have come to you because you decide to not go to trust God or whatever anymore. So many people have a God wound that then they start going into this occult stuff
Yep,
because
exactly.
it makes them feel like I found my tribe. I
That's right.
found these people that allow me to be my toxic self. I'm sorry, but oftentimes it's what it is.
It is.
I've known so many people who are the quote unquote wounded healer that should never lay hands on an individual because
Yeah.
they are just pouring their iniquity and crap into somebody else. And then the person feels
Yes.
like garbage afterwards.
Yeah.
And so there are people that they just want to be accepted and loved for who they are and all their brokenness. And I get that. But instead of really rising to the occasion and becoming a better version, they just want to have the free pass to do whatever they want without any type of mental evolution, spiritual evolution, maybe having to have some courage and do things that they don't want to do, or they aren't willing to do it in ordinary reality because I was burned at the stake in another life,
Right.
or because my parents did this. And I don't mean to like crap on people who've had trauma because I have,
Yeah,
but
totally.
they rather spiritually bypass what they have to do as a human, sign a deal with something and go, hey, I'm amazing because I manifested this thing.
Right.
And then they pat themselves on the back, try to have $1 million coaching business or do whatever. And when that thing pulls in its marker, or it leads you to that horrible toxic person that's going to control you through them, oh my God, I've seen it so many times. I've lived it, unfortunately,
Yeah.
where thinking that I'm doing the right thing. And sometimes people don't recognize that they go through something and their guides get stepped out and they get replaced by a counterfeit.
Mm-hmm.
Like we
Yeah.
talked about earlier before we got on the show, I'm like, if I hear one more person say they channel Archangel Michael but
I
their
know.
life is crap,
Yeah.
I'm like, or my angels, doesn't mean it's not a fallen angel. The term angel, if you're not specific,
Yeah.
that leads it open to all these different things. Or you pray to the light. Which light? This is
Yeah.
why I say, I don't mean to get biblical here, but call on Holy Spirit, call on like heavenly light, call on something a little more specific than just the light, because there
Yeah.
are enough beings out there like, oh, this one's dumb and isn't specific enough. And it becomes a lifelong thing
Yeah.
of then trauma from the spirit side.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, until we have fully ascended and into this new earth frequency. I mean, the false matrix, there are certain binding rules. There's this cause and effect. It's Saturn or Satan's realm here. And
Mhm.
so there's a karmic cause and effect that happens here that we have to operate within, just like I tell light workers, star seeds, mystics, whatever they're calling themselves, before you can really tap out of this matrix or ascend it, you have to master it. It's like you can't just go to the top of Mount Shasta and um, pray for abundance. You do have to heal your relationship with money. And yes, there are Illuminati symbols on our American dollars. Okay, I get it. Some of these Shasta people, they'll say it's black magic. I'm not having anything to do with money. I'll just eat pine cones. I will meditate. And I'm like, if that is what really feels right to you, then do it. But oftentimes there's this, I just don't want to play the game at all when unfortunately you on some level did choose to incarnate into a game, into a video game actually, a very dualistic, exaggerated dualistic video game, and they aren't getting that they're here to, you were sent into the hell realms, if we want to call it that, to shine a light there or be the light in that realm. And so we have to get to the source of the infection and work our way out. You can't just, I'm going to separate myself from it or I'm going to ignore it, because that's truly the spiritual bypassing that's happening. And I also believe that people during this ascension process, our upper chakras are being opened, and you have people, their crown, their throat, their third eyes are really opening, and all the stuff that lives in the chakras that are the lower expression in the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, and the navel, you have all of that stuff that's rising up to the surface as these are opening to clear so that the whole organism can, like an infinity symbol, operate as a unified organism. They don't want to face those things because some of it is so dark, so they get addicted to the guides and the sparkly things they're seeing, and the what they would deem the spiritual. I have so many people at retreats when I say, put something on the altar, here's the body direction, here's the spirit direction, they always want to put something in the spirit direction. I want spirit guides, I want spiritual this, and I'm like, why aren't you putting something in the body direction? Why are you trying to escape the body? Because putting a stone there may actually call more spirit into your body rather than taking you out of the body. They don't understand that we're here to embody more light, not to get out into some light that is somewhere else. So, what do you feel about all that?
Well, I encourage people to stop labeling this the hell realm because they are just making it that way.
Yeah,
Because to be honest, heaven and hell are within us. There are people that are not even dead. They are suffering from satanic voices.
yeah,
They are being poked by spirits. They are just walking around their own living, breathing planet. We all are.
yeah,
And so this realm, Satan might have fallen here, but this is not his realm. And whenever anybody gives him that leadership role,
I
they're
agree.
buying into it,
I
and
agree.
that they see the world through this filter
Yeah,
where he is their God and has dominion, and
yeah,
therefore their life sucks, and they feel like the best that God can do is help them escape.
yeah,
And so that's where for me it's like I don't want to get on a soapbox about this, but when people assign this realm to Satan, they just signed a contract. They just agreed that the reality they live in is shit, and that the best they can do is escape it, and
right.
their body included.
Yeah,
So a lot of people they dissociate, and because they still have the memory or the imprint of somebody within their body. In fact, like a lot of my clients who are have been sexually abused, they often don't know that when they have to eat or go to the bathroom, or they have
right,
problems with the lower half of their body, like
right.
digestion or pelvic
I've
issues,
had those issues.
because their consciousness is way up here,
Right.
and they still have the memory of the person who harmed them down below.
Hmm.
And until that imprint is removed,
Yeah,
and their consciousness, their spirit, and their soul, they are not the same thing. Until their spirit and their soul are all the way in and down,
yeah,
then that thing has dominion. And we don't want it to be that way, but the more you check out, the less power you have, and the more at the mercy you feel at something that you have put on a throne that doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
And so the way I look at it is people just go, oh, well, that's the way it is. It will become more of a quote unquote heaven on earth scenario when more people buy into that something is stronger
Yeah.
and flip the governing pillars here: family, education, technology, um, government, politics type thing. There are multiple pillars here, mountains here that are being. We have gatekeepers of both realms vying for power, and so when the main power of those quote unquote mountains or pillars of society are flipped from darkness to light, that's when the whole heaven on earth or the ascension process
Yeah.
is, where you don't have to like die
That's
to
right.
have a good experience, because that's what
Right.
I see. People use spirituality or church to escape their life because they
Right.
have given dominion of it to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so I want you to take us into um, how you got to be where you are now, because, interacting with you now, I would have never known that you had that many strokes or that you had open heart surgery and that you had a walk-in and that you'd been through all of this. The battle scars don't necessarily show on you because I feel like you've even healed a lot of the scarring too from that. So take us into how you healed through all of that, and you have been, but I mean where you are at now, which feels so solid.
Well, it's interesting because again, I've been doing this since 2004. So that's 21 years. But it wasn't until 2.5 years ago where my quote unquote team guides had stepped out and I felt like I had died. I felt like I had been fired by God. I felt like everything I'd worked so hard from had been erased and that I was starting over from scratch. And then I was just like, I started to do something called HeartMath,
Hmm.
where, it's from the HeartMath Institute. They found that you have 44,000 neurons. It generates the largest electromagnetic field in the
Yeah.
body. And so I really started to tap into the consciousness that beats my heart, because that is the seat of my soul.
Yeah.
And that is actually a lot of shamans in different cultures talk about the heart. Even if you think about like the Egyptians, they had the goddess Mot weighing the heart against a feather.
Mhm.
If you are neutral or better, you weigh as much as a feather. If you are emotionally dense, like fear, anger,
Yeah.
grief, whatever, you are more earthbound
Yeah.
rather than stepping into the heavenly realms. So I started doing HeartMath. And from this place of neutrality, I was like, universe, tell me the truth. What was my role in every horrible thing that ever happened to me? And like, are you sure? And so they showed me, like, with toxic relationships, I'd been with a narcissist. I said, you're a people pleaser who overlooks and ignores red flags. You don't say what you mean or mean what you say. You try to people please others to stay emotionally safe, or because you think that you're going to manipulate them and become into
That's right.
becoming who you want them to be. And I was like, like, no, you're a manipulator. I was like, oh, I am a good person. And they're like,
Yeah.
you're a nice person. Nice and kind are two different things. And I was
Yes,
like,
nice is
oh,
different than good. It's this little song that I sing at my retreats. I'm like,
oh
all I
yeah.
can think about is that song, and I'm seeing the zodiac sign Libra, where there's this. When I deal a lot with Libra energy, I'm always saying, "Are you sure that you're people pleasing because you care about them, or because you're slightly manipulating them? Because you not only want to feel safe, but because that's one way to get them to do what you want them to do. Everyone says Scorpio is so manipulative, but Libra is about to become Scorpio if we're looking at like astrology as a cycle. And so it's like mastering the art of manipulating another too on its shadow side. So it's a really great point that you bring up. And a lot of empaths and spiritual people are really guilty of this, where they really get on the narcissist. They're a narcissist. And I'm like, well, you've had so much narcissistic abuse that you as an empath also have some narcissistic tendencies. And it was also out of survival. Let's all stop looking for how incredible we are and start diving into our shadow and really looking at ourselves, which is why those people want to stay up here because they have to look at what's down here, and what's down here is so intense. I mean, what you've been through is so intense. I can feel the alchemy that has happened through your body, which was after what your grandfather did, after certain things that have happened in other lives here on this planet for you, certain contracts that were made that needed to be broken. It had to be that big. You know, it had to be this multidimensional, and like a mirror maze. You thought you found your way out and you still hit a wall in 2023 when it was like, I feel abandoned, or I feel like I've died again. So there's again, this book isn't done. There's this other chapter that we're moving into. So tell us where you are now.
Well, I just want to touch back on something. So they said when your guide stepped out, look at who you are as a soul, and they showed me a single thread that said you as a human never grew at all. You hid behind their power. And so you had a lot of wisdom and discernment and power based on what you learned, but you as a human being still made terrible choices with the people that you chose, with money, with all these different things. And so they had to show me my life through a lens of utter truth frequency where I was not feeling guilty or ashamed. I had to see what I had to start and stop doing to become a different version of self, different habits with diet, different clearing out toxic
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
and really like stop people pleasing to the point of like listening to a person with utter neutrality and stop playing the role where I offered help. And I don't mean to be mean or rude, but I had to ask myself, what is my role in their life? And if I'm not supposed to do something, I don't offer it
Yeah.
because that's not the lesson. And the wrong people left my life in droves and the right people came in.
Yeah.
But I also had to change my relationship with money. I had to change my relationship with my younger self. I
Yeah.
had to put myself and my mother and other people in a seat across from me and ask them what they wanted to know about me or themselves
Yeah.
so they could have a better experience of me.
Yeah.
I had to do healing
You did some
of,
big shadow work that
oh
I feel
yeah,
that your body had to do. I don't even think you could have gotten to this point through all of those years, no matter how many Four Winds retreats, and because
yeah,
that laid the groundwork. But you were still in such survival mode. And we're not talking about, oh my gosh, am I going to have enough money to buy food next week? No, I have this incurable disease that I'm going to die from over and over and having near death experiences. You were at capacity with the lower chakras, and now you can truly merge with soul and do that shadow work. And that's really beautiful because how could you have done it before? Your whole body, we needed to save the body first. You had to
right.
save your own life so many times. So I'm giving you your flowers for that. And now that you're in the clear, because I can, when I tune into your energy, I'm just like, I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
it's
you've
fine.
even used spiritual modern. Is that what it's called? It's a scarring cream that you put on.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you heal the cut, but also you're like healing the scar too, as if what I'm feeling spiritual or psychically right now is that there are versions of you who were never bound to these contracts that you're merging with now. So it's
Yeah.
almost as if the version you are now and becoming never had it. The grandfather never did that to the bloodline. The body never went through that. It's really cool how you're bringing it together on an energetic level. And even through all the training you've had, you know intellectually, I need to look at my shadow. But energetically, your soul and you are on the same page now, is what it feels like. Like we're going to look at this together with compassion instead of so many spiritual people doing the shadow work and just whipping themselves and beating themselves up, which makes them even more susceptible to false matrix or dark entities when they go into doing this level of work that you're doing in your path. So, and I love that you're so vulnerable because I want people to hear like you are a new earth leader, you are an amazing practitioner, you have all of this training. That doesn't make you the Dalai Lama or some kind of, you are a true embodiment of a wounded healer who is using your wounds to heal yourself and to have compassion for others and self rather than just projecting the wound onto the client or onto the other. And how amazing it is that you've survived up to this point, and now you're in your thriving era, is what I keep feeling.
Well, I went down like looking into other different things like ministry, actually, like Dan Duvall, who has Bride Ministries, and several other pastors out there. I'm like, I need to learn something about deliverance, because there are some things right now that people are going through that even as a healer I couldn't break. And I had to realize that people have been making deals with things, and as a healer I could not break them for them.
Yeah.
It made legal binding contracts, soul contracts, verbally agreeing to their pastor, their cult leader, their spiritual whatever, doing these ceremonies and rituals. And again, they get them so far, only to have that leash pulled back, going, hey, now I have a title against you. I have a
Absolutely.
lien against you. I own you. And then they realize, like, wait a minute, these things allowed me to make this amount of money, to have these relationships, and then they pulled out the rug from underneath me,
Yeah.
because one, they probably didn't feed these things, because they don't realize they have to feed them with blood and with all sorts of other things,
Yeah.
alcohol, fire, the you name it. And so this thing goes, I have a lien against you because I gave you the service and you didn't pay me.
Yeah.
Or there's a title because you've actually signed something, because you're like, I'm doing my soul contract work and I'm going to upgrade myself. Good luck with that. So I started to look into deliverance, and going, one of the things that they talk about in some of these different things is like how, if there's accusations against you over and over and over again, in some realm there may be a verdict against you.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what you have to do is own it, repent for it, and then ask for it to be removed by going literally to a court in another realm and saying, these judgments have been passed against me, because just because you ignore them doesn't mean that you didn't lose by default.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking into these other realms and going, okay, as a representative from my bloodline, I'm going to take responsibility for what my ancestors did. I'm going to repent for it. Sorry for the Christian language,
Yeah,
but
it's okay.
I'm going to repent for it, and I'm going to ask it to be cleared from my record, and show me if there's something I need, what else more I can do, or can I get some mercy on this, even if I did it myself. Because so many people would make jokes like going, wow, you must have been a horrible person in another life to deserve everything
Oh,
you've lived through.
ugh.
So that right there is a verdict. I deserved it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the X, Y, and Z. So, or people would keep saying, you are so dark, you're so bad, you're evil. And I'm like, I was just flummoxed for
Yeah.
years, not realizing there's
Yeah.
this ancestral thing hanging over my head that made me evil by default. Even
Right.
though I was not a bad person,
Yeah.
but I was trying to overcompensate for how many people, I've lost count of how many people have come up to me in grocery stores, gyms, restaurants, whatever, saying horrible things to me.
Yeah.
And I don't even know who the hell they are.
Yeah.
And then all the doctors refusing me care. And so it's like, I was like, what is this that so many people have all these judgments and things against me? And so I had to overcome this identity, which is a victim identity
Totally.
or whatever. And so part of this is like having to change my identity, not identify with being a victim, but also taking responsibility for what has been placed on me, break it, and then come
That's
into a new
huge.
version of self. So I'm like, okay, if somebody's saying this about me, I'm going to own it, repent for it, break it, do whatever. So I'm
Yeah.
blending all these different things to try to overcome the stuff instead of trying to outrun it.
Yeah. Which is why it's working. And you didn't have the capacity to even go there when you were trying to save your life, or you didn't know who you were for 2.5 years. Like, that's not when we're going to be able to do our highest level healing in those moments. Those are the moments that really embody something that you're going to help other people with. And that's where I want to go next. Before we go, tell us about the work you do and how people can find you. Because we're going to put all of your links in the show notes, bonesoferarth.org. Go check out Ashley for sure. You're on Gnostic TV. You have your own podcast. So we're going to put all of these links in the show notes. But I want you to tell people what you offer, what the work is that you do, because I'm going to have you on for a part two, but just let us know where we can find you.
So it's Bones of the Earth.
Bones of the Earth.
Yeah, bonesoftheearth.org. I do channeled readings where I tap, people send me their questions in advance. I tap into, the ether, the Holy Spirit, their self, and channel for up to 8 hours ahead of time. Write down everything I see, hear, feel, and experience, and share it during the reading.
Yeah.
I also do quantum healing or multidimensional healing, where I'm looking to see what needs to be shifted in both ordinary and non-ordinary reality, because it could be soul contracts, it could be soul retrieval or extraction of intrusive
Yeah.
energy.
It kind of looks like multidimensional shamanic work rather than earth-based. It's like galactic or multidimensional.
But there may be earth things. If you're in a
Yeah.
toxic relationship, you may have to get out of that. If you
You
have a
may have to
horrible,
get out of that for sure.
because you are who you hang with. You
Yeah.
will sync up with people. Or if
Yeah.
you are speaking poorly against yourself, you're just casting spells all over the place against yourself, cursing yourself. So there might be some things in ordinary reality that need to change,
Yeah.
and or you might have to do some breath work or something to reset your nervous system. But there's also stuff that I can do on my end. And then I also do house blessings and clearings for the land,
Uh-huh.
commercial buildings or homes that have these energies stuck in there, because they're just like humans. They have their own chakras and things that happen that need to be cleared or blessed. So yeah, so you can find my podcast on Gnostic TV. Just look up Ashley Brothers, or go to my website, bonesoftheearth.org.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Ashley. I know that we really have, we've scratched more than just the surface, but there's so much more we could go into. And so I'll have you on for a part two. And I appreciate you being so vulnerable and also for saving your own life so many times and for not letting the journey ever end, getting to a new chapter or a new level or a new perspective and, surrendering that you didn't know it all and that you did give your power away to guides and that the power is within you and you really had to live the whole experience. And just thank you for continuing on. And, I'm thinking you're human right now, but I'm also thinking the soul and the light within you because there's something really driving this because for all intents and purposes, you should have died, right? But,
Oh yeah.
or could have, I shouldn't say should, but could have died so many times, or it was even happening and it still didn't. It's like there's a timeline mastery that you have embodied through all of this pain. And so that's really incredible to witness. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Is there anything that you want to leave us with before we go?
I would just really encourage people to know themselves and to offer love and mercy to themselves and really get to know the consciousness that beats their heart, because the intelligence within you is so vast that you don't become more powerful because of guides. You can become more powerful in who you are, because the guides rely on us to do what they tell us. Now imagine if you were tapped into your higher self like you are, having your higher self, your transcended version of spirit as your guide.
Yeah.
Your life will be so infinitely better and stronger, and so will everybody around you, because you will lift up everybody when you do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I receive it. And thank you all out in the audience for listening and witnessing us during our process as practitioners and shamanic healers and mystics, light workers. We see you all as well. We're all in this together in this mass ascension process. And we are all ascending the matrix the best that we can. We're truly in this together, and it is messy. It is wild. It is scary. There are many things happening to us that we've had lives on this planet where we had one of these exciting events happen once in those lifetimes, and now we're having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It's okay to feel anxious sometimes. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to not know who to trust, and then to be reminded that you've got your higher self. It's always returning to the light. The darkness always serves the light. And so I appreciate you, Ashley, once again for being here. And if anyone would like to work with me or wants more information about me, you can go to chrisking.com, Chris with a Y, King with a Y, medicinealchemist.com, and ascended-astrology.com. I love you all, and we'll see you next time.